There was good news this week from the state of Louisiana, as a state House committee rejected legislation banning specific types of counseling for children. The ban on so-called conversion therapy regulates even conversations that a therapist could have with a minor client. Now, what's motivating the effort to pass the bill? And what's the future of the issue in Louisiana? Joining me now to discuss it is the Louisiana Solicitor General, Liz Murrill. Solicitor General Murrill, welcome to Washington Watch.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you. Now, a lot of people may not be familiar with this issue. Practically speaking, what would happen for people in Louisiana if this bill were to become law?
I think it would inhibit conversations about gender and about ordinary sort of male-female relationships, because it prohibits counselors from questioning someone's thoughts and feelings where they may be experiencing some kind of gender dysmorphia. It only permits you to affirm any of their questions or feelings instead of actually having a discussion about it and talking about any potential downside to any kind of heterosexual relationship, basically.
Now, this debate over conversion therapy in the United States is not new, but I think it's important that it really got momentum when the focus was on the L, the G, and the B in the LGBT suite. And it was about not being able to pray the gay away, as they would say sometimes. But more recently, the emphasis and the priority has been on the T, but the legislation tries to paint them all with a broad brush and says, in the same way that you can't try to make somebody not be gay, you essentially can't help a boy become comfortable with his body if he experiences gender dysphoria. Is that what this is doing, as well as treating both of these situations, though they are very different, identically?
Yeah, it's very broad. I mean, that's one of the problems with the language of this bill, is that it uses such broad language. If I could just define it a little bit, in the bill, it says conversion therapy means any practice or treatment conducted without a person's consent. In other words, if a parent sends their child to a Christian counselor, which is intended to change the person's sexual orientation or gender identity, including efforts to change behaviors or gender expressions, or to eliminate or reduce sexual or romantic attractions or feelings toward individuals of the same sex or gender. It also includes two-spirit. I'm not sure exactly what that covers, but in defining who it covers people who identify as two-spirit. We just keep expanding the alphabet to come up with different expressions of someone's physical identity or their what they feel they are in their brain and their head compared to what their body says they are, and separating these things from what they believe, but basically saying that what your physical body tells you is a social construct. I have a problem with it myself.
Yeah. And I think your definition there is important, and the breadth of the definition is important, because it appears, prohibit a counselor from helping a minor child with something, for example, a porn addiction. If it happened to be homosexual pornography, you couldn't deal with that if it required you to reduce or eliminate same-sex attraction. And so it has really, really broad implications. But one of the things that people are concerned about in this legislation is whether it affects churches and religious organizations and the ability to minister in their religious capacity. Does this bill affect churches?
Look, I think it does. I think it does because the language is very, very broad. And I sat through committee testimony on this bill, and there were a number of people that kept saying, it doesn't say anything about religion in this bill, but by its very terms, it exposes Christian counseling to in its current form, criminal violations. I mean, it turns it into criminal conduct. Now, there is an amendment to take out the criminal penalties, but a counselor who characterizes themselves as a Christian counselor, and we have a whole bunch of them just down the street at First Presbyterian Church, and then bases basically their counseling in Christian beliefs would violate this law. Because if you believe in relationships and heterosexual relationships and you believe in a biblical view, then you would actually be violating this law if you counseled somebody about that. A child, particularly if they're a minor, you would be violating the law and you could lose your license as a counselor.
These bills have been passed in other states. There has been significant litigation around them. Court rulings in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama have blocked these counseling bans. They are in effect in other states. Can you tell us the status of the litigation around this issue?
I haven't looked at all the litigation around the country on this issue. I suspect it's different depending on what the state is and what their particular political orientation is for starters, but also the language in their bill. So there was a lot of discussion in committee about narrowing the language in this bill and defining what what part of conversion therapy might actually be prohibited. So I think that legally that the committee could likely pass a law that would prohibit certain types of actual medical conduct like electroshock therapy on a minor. But what I don't think they can prohibit is speech. And that's what they are trying to do. They are trying to penalize counselors for engaging in what they believe to be the proper counseling of an individual, and to expose them to losing their license based on what they say.
And that is one of the important issues. And Solicitor General Murrill, we appreciate your time very much today. One of the other important issues that I'm sure is being investigated in Louisiana is often these are pushed with no evidence that there's any abuse taking place in the jurisdiction. They talk about abuse and manipulation of minors, which everyone is opposed to, and it's frankly already illegal under criminal statutes. But they use that as a justification to silence people's speech in the therapist room. And we appreciate your efforts on this issue and your time today bringing this to our attention. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.